Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram and I'm the host here at iThemes Training. And we are joined once again by our good friend Rebecca Gill, who is our resident expert on search engine optimization and all things Google. Welcome, Rebecca. We're glad you're with us today.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we have an interesting discussion today about the Google Knowledge Graph. Which, as I was just mentioning in the pre-show, is something I need to know more about, and I hope you do as well. And if you do, you are definitely in the right place. If you're just joining us in GoToWebinar, again, we invite you to the live chat room over at iThemes.com/chat. iThemes.com/chat. That's where we're going to take questions throughout the webinar. So if this is your first iThemes training webinar, we do want to let you know that we don't use the GoToWebinar questions feature. If you have a question, just drop it in over there in the live chat room. And it's helpful if you preface your question with the word question in all uppercase, especially if the discussion starts going and the chat room starts moving quickly. That'll help me pull those questions out, and we'll give those to Rebecca as she pauses throughout the presentation to catch those questions. I also want to let you know there are no slides today. This is going to be a live demo working through Knowledge Graph and learning all the things we need to learn live there. So there are not handouts to share, but we will be sharing with you a resource that you can access after the webinar to learn more about Knowledge Graph. So Rebecca, why don't you just give us a little overview of where we're headed today and what we can look for.
Okay, so my goal today is to make the knowledge graph seem not so scary and intimidating, because that was what I felt like when I first started to dig into it and even consider doing a webinar on it. It doesn't have to be, and we're just going to break it down in some core pieces so that you see that the knowledge graph is stuff you're already seeing in Google, and it's right in front of you, and you're using it every day without ever even probably noticing that you are. So that's our plan. So we'll talk about the knowledge graph as an overview, what it is, that type of thing. We'll look at specific examples of the different types and the components of the knowledge graph. We'll talk about ranking for the knowledge graph. And then we'll leave some open room for Q&A like I always do, and we'll try to hit as many questions as possible. If during the presentation you are having difficulty seeing the fonts or seeing the screen, please just make a note of it in the chat, and I will make my font bigger. I've already increased them, but I never know what size everybody's on for their monitor. So what looks great to 80% of us might send 20 of you struggling, and I don't want that to happen. So just kind of jump in if that's the case. Nathan, anything you want to talk about before we dig in?
No, let's dive right in.
Okay, so like I said, the knowledge graph really intimidated me, and I've been doing SEO for 15 years, and that's silly because it shouldn't. It's just another piece of Google's services that they offer, and it really is it's not that intimidating and that scary once you start to break it down, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's just talk about, what is the knowledge graph? The knowledge graph is part of search, and it was started in 2012 by Google. And it's just a way of Google presenting information on people, places, and things, right? They're already doing that, so that's not anything new to us. The difference, though, is when Google is using the knowledge graph, it's doing so in a different way. It actually knows how those people, places, and things all interconnect with each other and how they relate to the world around us. And when you start to think about how the knowledge graph is used, it's really cool and it's really freaky all at the same time, because it really shows you the power of Google and the information they have readily available. So what are some things that we can find in the knowledge graph? Things are like, and I'm going to go through various different examples, but at a high level, it's companies like Home Depot. It's people like Frank Lloyd Wright or Nobel Prize winners. It's sports teams like the Chicago Bulls. It could be art like Mona Lisa, or buildings like the Eiffel Tower. Movies, locations, and times and places to get tickets. It could be recipes like baked salmon or potato salad. Music like country music or hip hop or a specific artist. And then it could be images like I want to see images for cute cats. Any of those things can produce data from the knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph is going to come in line with other search engine results, which means for a lot of times you probably don't even notice that you're seeing it. So before we go into examples, I want to talk about the prevalence of the knowledge graph in current day search. So when it first started in 2012, it was very sporadic and it wasn't seen very often with that data. And it's been increasing as the years have gone on. And 2012 was only 5 years ago, right? So it's not that long ago that this came out and it started to get used within search. But now today, in a recent study that was done for 1.4 million queries, it showed that 50% of those queries are using knowledge graph data. 50%. So if you're sitting on here thinking today, I don't really need to know about this, you are wrong. You really do. If you care about search, if you are using SEO for yourself or for your clients, you need to understand what the knowledge graph is, because at some point within half of those searches that are done, you're going to get featured snippets back or rich answers or direct answers or something else that's coming from the knowledge graph. So it does really make an impact on the day in the life of a user of search. So one of the first things that we're going to look at is what is called a knowledge panel or card. Now, I'm going to give you some phrases. Do not feel like you have to write all this down in all of these examples and try to, put this into memory. Like Nathan said, I have a resource available to you, so we'll throw that out at the end. So, if I went through things and it wasn't like super clear, I have all of this in a resource that you can utilize after the webinar. But okay, so let's start with the knowledge panel. The knowledge panel was something that came out in 2012. It is also called the knowledge card. It's going to have two primary results. One is a brand result, which is like Home Depot. So when you search for a large brand or a large company in the US, Home Depot is huge. We have one in like every decent sized city. So lined up next to your regular results, for ads and the organic stuff, you're going to see this box over to the right. Now, this box over to the right gives you an overview of the company, things like stock prices and, the date founded, some founders, like anybody really cares about that, but that's okay. It gives us links to the social profiles. It's showing us executives, and then it's showing us things that people also search for, right? It's quite a bit of information right there in that little box. That box is the brand knowledge panel. So that gives us a lot of really good information about a company like Home Depot. We could look at Macy's or American Airlines or, really virtually any large corporation around the world. Another example that we have is what's called the local knowledge panel. So now, unlike that brand one that is for well-known companies, the local panel is what's going to happen when you search for something more generic. So what happens if I search for Mexican restaurants? And I always spell stuff wrong, and that's okay. And I'm not going to finish the near me. Oops. Oh, nothing ever goes right when you want it to. Okay, Mexican restaurants. This is also pulling knowledge panel data, but however, this one is now pulling the local version of it. So this is when I have something more generic. And instead of showing me just one brand, it is showing me a number of different listings, right? Also, this is showing like local listings, as we see there. Since I did not put in my geographical location, it is automatically pulling those listings that are close to me. But I could actually put in New York, and I would get, again, the local knowledge panel listings, similar to the brands, but much more scaled back. And you might be wondering, how are these showing up here? And it's really based on the same thing as local search: relevance, distance, and prominence. Those are the three categories that Google always uses to display these kind of search results. And there's a whole, we've done webinars on the local, so I'm not going to go into that in depth. I just wanted you to know that for that knowledge panel, there's the brand and then there's the local, and they're handled differently. One shows up on the right with just one listing. One shows up in line with your organic results, and there's multiple listings. Now, some companies like mine, Web Savvy Marketing, can show up in both. So if you were to search for the name Web Savvy Marketing, you're going to get a brand location. And that's because we're internet based and we're all over the internet, right? So Google knows who we are, and it is going to give us this result on the right. Now, what happens if I were to look for just web design? I think it's web design. Does local. All right, so maybe it wasn't web design that I used before. There's a search term that we come up with in the local pack. Depends on your category heavily, by the way. Yeah, thanks, Google. I used to show up right there. Now I'm not showing up for this example. Okay, anyways, we do show up on both. When I was doing this last week and preparing for the webinar, we were there and I must have used a different phrase. But again, based on the type of company you have or the type of search you have, you could show up on both, and it's based on the user and the user's intent. And we've talked about user intent in prior webinars. So how can you control what is actually going to show up in the knowledge panel results? The data for the knowledge panel is going to come from a number of different sources. The first one is you. It's what you enter into your Google My Business listing if you are a local business or if you've set up like a brand page. It comes from your website. It comes from other users who have suggested changes for you. And then it comes from some third-party sources of data that Google doesn't actually provide information on. Now, Home Depot had their social media profiles listed in that knowledge box, right? So how do they get it there? Well, it's the consistency of their information. It's the fact that they've verified their social media accounts with those websites. And then that data can also come from structured markup within your website. So a number of different areas that you can have display that data for you within the Google search results. The important thing, again, you want that information to show up. You definitely want to help control that data. So you know, first and foremost, make sure that your Google My Business account, which used to be Google Plus, Google Places, and probably 400 other different names, you want to make sure that is accurate. Okay, so let's move on with the next type of knowledge graph item we have, which is the knowledge box. This is also called the answer box. This guy was first introduced in 2013, so a year after our last example. The usage of this has significantly increased year after year, and Stone Temple Consulting has some good data on this. I won't go into it here, but the point of it is that I want you to take away is it has continued to increase significantly. So we have to definitely take note of it because, you know, the opportunities for it to show up in search are great. And the easiest way for me to give this example of the answer box is to just start showing you some. It honestly is just the easiest way to digest it. So, and by the way, you're already all using this. You just don't realize that this is what it's called. So if I do USD to Euro, what happens? Google is automatically bringing me back the conversion rate and giving me a box to be able to create conversions. This is basically the answer box. Another example would be, what if I type in ramifications? It is giving me another answer box, which is a quick example of what that phrase is. Now, let's say I am preparing for my trip to Minneapolis next week, and I haven't bought my flight yet. And I actually do use this just to get a quick idea of flight times and prices before I go anywhere else. So if I just type in DTW, which is my local airport code, and MSP, which is the Minneapolis, Minnesota airport code, Google is automatically showing me flights and airlines and prices and giving me a ton of information right on the search engine results page. Now, some of you are probably freaking out and thinking about, well, they'll never get to my website. Well, you are correct. There's a lot of cases where people won't go to the website, like the conversions, because they don't need to. However, if I'm Delta and I have Delta show up for me, Rebecca Gill, twice, there's a good chance that I am headed over to Delta, and I'm going to, you know, look into Delta's flights in more depth. So I don't want you to fear the knowledge graph. I want you to understand the knowledge graph, and I want you to understand where you can influence the knowledge graph. And that's things that we're going to continue to cover today. So now what if I wanted to look at seasonal allergies? Because, you know, we have all at some point in our lives gone to the internet, looked up whatever ailment we have, and decided that we were dying of some deadly disease that only happens to 4 out of, the entire world's population. I've done it. I know you've done it too, whether or not you want to admit it out loud. But in this case, I just typed in seasonal allergies and it brought up the little box over to the side, and it gives me actually quite a bit of good information. And it's got tabs and I can learn more information and continue further into my research. Again, an example of the answer box. Here's another one that I use a lot. Remember when we actually had to go get paper maps and get them out and like unfold them and smooth out the creases so we could actually read them? No one does that anymore. We just all go to the internet and we type in things like Michigan map. And I have all of these images that I can pull up, or this right here where I can dig in and find out more information. So here's another one that I use because I am a type 1 diabetic and I live and breathe by carbs. I am constantly looking up carb counts for foods that I eat because I actually have to balance that with insulin intake. This is a ton of information available to us. Not only, and this is a mixed one, so not only am I getting the answer box right here, which doesn't make me go any further if I don't want to, I have additional information in this box and I got additional information over here. And when you compare this to the type of results that we received from Google 5 years ago or 7 years ago, there is a huge difference in the quality of information. What does that do for us with search? Again, you can fear it and say no one will ever come to my website, or you can look at it in a positive way and say, you know what? Search is getting so good and it's doing such a great job on Google to be able to answer people's questions and solve their problems that users are more inclined to utilize the service more and more as part of their daily lives. And in my world, I believe in the latter statement, and that I believe it to be positive because I do think that the quality of the results are getting so good that we are, without realizing it, using search engines, particularly Google, more and more as part of our daily lives, and we're utilizing this type of information. It keeps bringing us back time and time again. Okay, some quick more examples of this type of search. Detroit Tigers scores. Can you tell where I live? Because I'm pulling up all these types of things that I know are around me that people would search for. This is giving me very real-time data on the last game and the results for it. And then my final one for this type of search is Apple stock. Again, a mixed type of result. I see the actual price of the stock currently. I see the brand panel over to the right, and then I start to see recent news right underneath that. So that's a great search as well. We can do other things like translations and weather, and just a host of different types of searches. But this gives you an idea of the type of information that's coming from this type of knowledge graph data, and the power that it has, right, to truly answer questions and solve problems for users. Here's the negative, though, of this, is in a lot of these cases, none of this data is coming from websites because it's coming from Google's own data and their own database. So it's not actually going to point someone back to your website and send them over to you. And unfortunately, that is just the nature of this search. And, we can't fight that. And I don't want you to fight that. I want you to understand which ones you can influence and focus on those. So we're going to go to the next one, which is one you can influence, and this is featured snippets. I love featured snippets, and I think featured snippets are just a huge opportunity for marketers and website owners. So featured snippets were first introduced in 2014, and they have gained incredible strength in the last few years. This is what we consider to be position 0. So it's a way for you to show up at the very top of search results before anything else shows up. Get an example up. So now this is what I really find interesting. This is a search phrase that my website has ranked for years, probably like 6 or 7 years, right? And I've always ranked well for it. I've used this in examples before when we have had webinars at various points in time. It did not show up as a featured snippet until just recently. And by recently, I mean like the last couple months. And what this shows us is that this and other types of searches is that the frequency of featured snippets is becoming so prevalent. It's just part of everyday search, and it's growing and growing and growing. So position 0, when I say position 0, it means that Google has taken a portion of my content, and it's from this URL right here, and it's placed it above anything else. I'm above ads, I'm above organic listings, and a lot of times pulls an image out along with it. Now, in recent months, we've noticed that the image here and the content here can actually come from 2 different websites. In this case, they're both coming from my website and the same URL, but in recent months, again, we've seen that it can come from completely 2 different sources, which perplexes me, but Google's doing it more and more. So there's 3 different types of feature snippets that can appear in this position 0. One is paragraphs, which is what you're seeing. Another one is lists, and another one is table data. So paragraphs, there's some varying data on this, right? Because this is such a newer type of search result, and it is fluctuating so much over time, and Google's increasing the adoption of it. The percentages are really crazy. So it is estimated that between 53 and 82% of featured snippets show up in a paragraph like this. The list that I mentioned is 10 to 35%, and then tables are far less. They're at 7 to 11%. What's important to note, though, is 30% of all Google queries right now are showing up as featured snippets, which is a huge number, right? So that means so 30% of the phrases you're trying to rank on have some type of data up here at position 0. What does that tell you? That tells you that you want to be up here at position 0 because you want that spot. That spot is golden. I mean, it grabs your attention when somebody sees it. So, so let's look at some examples of featured snippets, and then we'll talk about how you can, position yourself for them. So this is one, and then here is another one that is new as well. So this one is pulling from a blog post that I did that links over to a free PDF. And here's the interesting thing is this is over a year old, yet it is still ranking at position 0, and it's just a simple blog post. I didn't try to rank this one for the featured snippets. I have tried to rank other ones for featured snippets like the content silo, and it did show up. So that was very targeted. But this example, and then my last one, which was the website design example, neither one did I try. And it's the nature of Google and how they are changing their data. Now, the interesting thing here is on that last one I showed you, I was both in position 0 and I was this first result. But on this one, I'm not. On this one, I am here, but I'm behind Moz. So, you don't always have to be position 0, or excuse me, you don't always have to be the top position to have Google pull out content from your website and show you as featured snippets. There have been some reported cases that websites as far back as ranking at position 100 has shown up here. So again, you don't have to be number 1, you just have to provide really, really good data. Okay, so let me give you examples of lists and then some tables. Now, this one is funny, and I don't know why it came to my mind to do it, but I did it anyways. Because everybody wants to bathe their cat, right? Which I have bathed cats before, and it is not pretty, and that's probably why I thought it came to my head. So this one is giving you a list, and remember I said this was one of the 3 types of results that are available in feature snippets. This is the second most common one, and this is pulling from the website, the list specifically from the website, and this is a WikiHow. Now we have one more example, which is WordPress hosting options. And this one isn't numbered list. This is a bulleted list, and it's actually even pulling out, percentages and pricing and everything else. So, lots of really good information. And here's what I love about snippets is I'm not fearful that people aren't going to click through to my website when they see me up there. I want to be in that position 0. I want to have that brand recognition so that they see me right away, right? and they want to click through to this and they want to learn more. That's why this is so powerful, because if you get your answer up here as a searcher, you're not going to continue down. This actual example is the one where I gave, not realizing I was doing this. This is where the image here is coming from a completely different source than here. Again, I don't know why they do it, but Google's doing it for some examples. So feature snippets, you need to take away some information on this, because this is where you can really make headway in search, where you can really dominate the search engine results page and bring in a lot more traffic to your site. So here's just a few tidbits on this type of knowledge panel information, knowledge graph information. So most are coming from longer tail phrases, right? They're not one word or 2 word searches, they're longer tail. You don't have to rank number 1 to be able to position in that featured snippet area. They tend to come from longer content. So like blog posts that are going to be around, 2,000 words per post are going to grab more of the search engine's attention and have enough data that the search engines want to push you into that position 0, give people a taste of what you have, and then have them click through to learn more. Paragraph versions of it, like the website design one I showed you, those tend to be about 40 to 50 words per paragraph. So if you want to rank for that, you need to make sure that whatever your description is going to be for that answer has a good paragraph that's about 40 to 50 words, and that will give a nice overview of your answer. Questions like what, why, and how will tend to show up more than other types of searches. So featured snippets does not need any special code on your website. You're going to follow the same type of optimization that we've covered before in webinars, or like I do in my online course. You just need to make sure that you're thinking more of that solution, longer tail phrases, possibly that what, why, and how, and then making sure that if you're targeting like a paragraph, you've got a good paragraph of 40 to 50 words. And if you're going to have some type of list, that you use bullets or numbers so Google can easily grab it and pull it out. I love this feature because it builds traffic and it builds trust, and you're just going to really position yourself well in search. Now, you might be wondering if you're showing up on featured snippets, and guess what? You can find this out by going to SEMrush and looking up your website. You can also look up any of your competitors to see if they're showing up on featured snippets and learn more about it by how they're using it. It's just a really good feature that SEMrush has available, and I used it to actually find these examples I gave you, because I didn't even know they were showing up in featured snippets until I was looking at it in SEMrush. Okay, so there's some good examples of feature snippets. Let's move on. So the next example is rich cards. Rich cards came out in 2016. And now in this one, this is a good way for website owners to control the way they're going to be presented in search. Now that language I just used is really different than what I used before, because before when we were talking about the knowledge graph and data, I was saying Google was pulling this information either from themselves or from your content, and you really didn't have a ton of control over what was happening. You can try to work towards it, but you didn't control it. Rich cards are different. You are in the driver's seat with rich cards. You control the data. What are some examples of rich cards? Rich cards are articles and books and courses and events and job postings and local businesses and music, recipes, reviews, TV shows, videos, and even podcasts. That's a kind of new one. So the newer ones that for rich cards: courses, job postings, podcasts is another fairly new one. Why do you control this data? Well, you're going to control this data because you're going to use structured data within your website and schema.org markup. And when you do that, you get to really start presenting information with how you want it to appear. So let's look at some examples. Again, this is rich cards. So this guy right here, he is actually coming from information within Google and then pulling from like Career Builder, right? And I can click, I'd like to see more. Very nice presentation of data. Wonderful example of how Google can use that to present some really strong information. Now let's go to one of the newer ones and look at podcasts. And darn it all, Google, you gave me a different example, and the resource that I have available for you later, you'll see a completely different set of results than what it's showing right now. Google drives me to want to drink sometimes. Let's look, and I hope you're all laughing because that was meant as a funny and not as have pity on me. Okay, so let's look at a TV show. Now this is really showing my age because if any of you were born 5 years later than me, you will not know what this is. This is just whatever show came to my mind when I was preparing for this webinar. It's Family Ties. It is from the early 80s, and yes, I really am that old. But like that brand, you know, the knowledge panel that we had for the big brands, this has kind of similar data, lots of, you know, really in-depth information from episodes and seasons to the cast to the kind of the overview. You know, it's got some ratings already for it. So just that's like just a ton. You can look at books and, you know, just some really good data. How can you control what type of rich cards examples will show up? Let me give you another one because I think, unless Google's changed things for me again. Oh, there we go. There's some recipes that are coming up. Easy chicken recipe. So here's a funny thing about this. So when I was pulling the information for the rich cards, because I wanted to show you some information from Google on schema and structured data, the examples Google gave us and the examples that we're seeing right here look completely different. And I find that funny because really we're all familiar with those, the rich cards for recipes if we've been doing web development, because tons of bloggers want to use them. And now look at the information that's showing up. They're not even there. Google is changing things so fast. It's just at record pace. And just to give you an example, let me go over to this guy right here. This right here is what I was going to show you, because before, traditionally, this is what we would see for that rich card. You know, for the recipe, it would show you calories, the cook time, the number of reviews, and I swear it was recently that this was still showing up, yet when I just did the search for you, it didn't show up at all. We were getting more regular results. But, you know, it's Google. We cannot control Google. We can only try to influence it. So how can you influence and do a little bit of control, you know, for rich cards? Well, you're going to use structured data, and we'll talk about that in just a second, and schema.org markup. There are plugins that you can use to help assist with this. So, you know, don't get overly stressed that you have to know all of this technology. I don't, and I wouldn't expect you to either. We're blessed with having a number, if you're using WordPress, that is, we're blessed of having a number of WordPress plugins that can help manage this for you. So the rich cards were rolled out internationally just in 2017 of March. So they are pretty new. I mean, we have been using them in the US for quite a while, but internationally, they're just this year that they were actually available. They do support AMP. They will be supported on both desktop and mobile. So that's all goodness for us. The scary part of it is just a little bit that you have to have certain data fields, and there's essentials that you have to be able to get this to actually show up. And I have had clients come to me before and say, hey, you know what? My rich cards aren't showing up. What's wrong? Well, it is because most likely you're missing some key critical elements, and we'll talk about this in just a second. So those are rich cards. And so the next thing is, you know, how do those come? Well, they come from structured data. And structured data, hopefully most of you have heard that before. So structured data is that what I'm showing you right here, right? And so I am actually, and if you've never noticed or seen this before, Google has this developer section of Google.com. The left you're seeing right here, this whole navigation bar on the left, and you do see for structured data, there's quite a bit of information available here. Same thing for AMP. So when I'm talking about structured data, don't get overly stressed. Know that there is good information on Google available to you, and it, you know, it just talks about what it is. It shows you some examples of the actual structured data markup. You know, it gives you some good how-to information. You know, it talks about what type of of sort of structured data is there, and microdata, and it's giving you some examples down here. Now this starts to get over my head because I have a coding team that works on this at our company, and it's not something that I myself dive into. But again, we do have some really good plugins for this, depending on what type of rich cards you want to display within search results. Google has a testing tool, which is right here, the structured data testing tool. You can get information within Search Console. Google Search Console will actually give you feedback on your rich cards and what's right and what's wrong with your structured data. So if you do have that on your website, or you're trying to position yourself for it and you've not checked Google Search Console, you definitely want to make sure that you do that, because you want to see if everything's right. It'll tell you exactly what is wrong and what you need to go fix. And and if you don't have everything right, you're most likely not showing up like you want to show up. So definitely things to explore and make sure that you're knowledgeable, at least to a level. If you're a marketer, okay, then, and you're not a developer, find somebody who can help you, or find a reputable plugin. So one last thing that I want to talk about with the knowledge graph is carousels. And carousels are, again, an area where you're not going to have much control. So if I look at types of corporations, I'd have to spell it right. You're going to see information up at the top. Now, these can be national, and they can actually be local types of data that's presented. So that's more of a national one. Another one would be something like General Motors vehicles. Oh, for heaven's sakes. I did this last week. I pulled an image of it, and my General Motors vehicles actually gave me a carousel up here with all of the vehicles displayed. Again, Google's making me want to drink. So let's try another example. My daughter is getting ready to go off to college next year, and we're looking at colleges. So this is one that I looked at. So there's Ivy League colleges. So that's an example. So just, just kind of gives you an idea of what could be available. Here's a local one. Traverse City events. Let's see if it actually does it like it did before. It did. Okay, so here's Traverse City events. Traverse City is a city in northern Michigan. Not huge, but does have a lot of stuff going on. And you'll see it is actually pulling in all of this results, and then it is kind of doing a blend, and it's giving us some additional information down here. So, as you see, remember I said at the very beginning that the knowledge graph is people, places, things, it's events. It's a big collection of data. So, so let's wrap up with a couple of things. Nathan is going to send out a link for you within the chat box, if you're on the chat box. And if you felt a little bit overwhelmed by all this and you want to be able to go through it or have a reference point, my DIYSEOcourses.com site actually has a free course that I did. And it's just a little mini course, but it goes through the things that I went through today with some information. That is available for you. All you need to do is just enroll in the course. It's completely free, no credit card required. I thought that would be easier for you as opposed to like a PowerPoint presentation. And here's the funny thing is, in that course, you're going to see images of what I expected to see today when Google wasn't giving it to me, because it gave it to me a week or 10 days ago. So Nathan, if you could throw that out there again, it's at DIYcourses.com. And just click on the SEO courses and the navigation, and it'll take you right to a course, and you'll see it says free and it's available. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Let's talk about how you can rank, right? How are you going to rank for the knowledge graph? So similar to ranking in regular search, right, for pages or posts or products, you're going to have to do things like competitive analysis, keyword research, site mapping, right? Mapping your keywords to specific content, creating high quality content that both the search engines and the users will like. You're going to have to do the same on-page optimization that you would do for those as well. The same off-page optimization with social media and link building. All of that stays the same. So where does it change? Well, let's look at, there's a few differentiators that you're going to have with trying to show up in the knowledge graph. The first one is that knowledge panel, right? The knowledge panel is when we looked at the Mexican restaurants like near me or Home Depot. To be able to show up there, you have to make sure that your social media setup is accurate and complete. So having profiles on the social media sites with an emphasis on Google My Business, that has to be properly filled out and updated. So that's how you're going to appear within the knowledge panel. Featured snippets is going to require you to have some good authority with Google. So most likely a brand new site's not going to show up there. However, a small site can. So don't feel like you're a small site and you can't go against these big sites. You absolutely can. You just need to make sure that you have really good content, and that if you want to be in that featured snippets, if you're going to have a paragraph example for data, remember it was 40 to 50 characters that you would want to present that data in. Or if it was like a list or a table, you need to have a nice list with numbers or bullets, or you have to have an easy to pull out and display table that Google can utilize as well. So those are the nuances of featured snippets. And then the third item was the rich cards, which was having good structured data and schema.org markup within your actual URL and that specific page that you want to display. Now, some of the other ones where we couldn't control was like the carousel. That was one that Google, is pulling from their own data, so we really don't have much control over that. And I don't want you to stress over it, because that one you can't. Gosh, I'm blanking on my other types that we've got that Google doesn't control. Oh, the knowledge answers. So those quick answers that Google's pulling up on, like the weather or conversions or maps or carbs, most likely they're going to pull that information and they have it all ready. So it's not going to lead back to your site. Don't stress over those. Worry about the ones that you can. Focus on featured snippets. Remember, I said that's position 0 when it's taking and dominating search. Make sure that's right. If you've got a type of content that is, that leads well to rich cards, make sure that's right. If you want to make sure your local business is showing up for those generic searches, or you have a brand and you want it to show up for, the search for your company name, make sure Google My Business is filled out. Those are the critical areas that you really need to pay attention to. And again, when you want to see what you're showing up for on these types of searches, go to SEMrush. I've preached it before because I love this tool and I'm in it every day. Utilize that service. It does have a free trial if you want to pull it up with the free trial. So that you can just kind of get a feel for it. You can data mine yourself as well as your competitors. Okay, Nathan, I am 3 minutes early with what I wanted to go through today.
Wow, that's awesome. This has been a fantastic bit of information. So there was a good discussion earlier about the fact that as things weren't showing up as you expected in Google, that might be a great drinking game for our trip to Mexico, right?
Seriously, it could be. I mean, so I'm showing the course right now on the DIY courses website. And just so I said, if you just go to SEO courses in the header, it's this guy right here, this big red guy. You can enroll with the red button or see the course content. I created this not more than 10 days ago, right? It was like a week to 10 days ago that I created this. I pulled screen images. They're inside this little free course, and then Google wasn't showing them to me today.
That's fantastic. And especially for those of you working with clients, this is a great example of just an illustration of how things change with Google that you can use to explain to your clients of how, much like a cat in a bathtub, it is impossible to control Google. So we have a lot of questions that were asked, and let me just start at the top here. So Stacy asked early on for local knowledge panel results. Rebecca, you mentioned a Google page to update. What page was that?
It's Google My Business.
Okay, the Google My Business page.
It's Google My Business. It used to be called, it was Google Plus, and then they did gosh, I don't even remember what the names were. It was Google, it's the Google Local is what it is. They've had so many names for it. I'm blanking on the other names. I said it earlier.
Yes, it's google.com/business, I believe is where it's located. If this Google search is correct, which, who knows. So I'm going to drop that URL in and you guys can have a look at that. Barbara just asked, is it possible, Rebecca, that those results not being present could be due to you not being signed in?
Nope, because I always make sure I do it in Firefox. that doesn't have me signed in and that shows no history.
Interesting.
I just think honestly that the search results are in flux because this is something that Google's continuously working on, and that's why we're seeing variances in data.
Interesting. Okay, Deb asks, when you get the info in the answer boxes, are the people who provide that information credited for that?
No. So the answer box was the one. Let me look. Yeah, the answer box, also called the knowledge box, is like the conversion from US dollars to euros, right? Google's not giving you a source for that. Google's using that data themselves. It's their own data that they're using in their own database. So they're not linking over to any other website or referencing any other website.
Interesting.
And like the carousel, let me go over the carousel when we did let me just pull one. So if I click, so this is a carousel. Oh, that said mention on Wikipedia. So this one does show references to Wikipedia, and we can see some references, but the majority of like the carousels are pulling internal data from Google, and they're not actually linking anywhere.
Interesting.
But again, we do have a lot of mixed results. And there was some mix during the webinar that we had, and I don't even remember what they were, but there were examples where we saw data here, and data here, and there were like different types of elements within the knowledge graph.
Alex had a question similar as well. When you did a search earlier under the knowledge graph data, there was the people also ask selections. Where did those come from?
Those are also part of the knowledge graph. Yep, absolutely. And those are coming from actual websites. And typically when you see those, you can link over to the website and get more information.
Interesting. Okay, question from Paul, who asks, is position 0 the same for everyone everywhere, or can your location or other information affect that result?
To my knowledge, it's the same for everyone, although I can't say that that's an absolute because we really don't know with Google because there's just hundreds of different variances that it uses for search results. So there's no way for me to absolutely know for sure. Now, granted, keep in mind that like when you're doing the local and you're looking for like Mexican restaurants, that's going to vary based on location. Right? And it could vary based on sign in or sign out, but a lot of those featured snippets tend to be national and they tend to be more uniform.
Okay, awesome. Folks, I've got a list of questions here. I think we'll have some time at the end for some additional ones, but it's very helpful to me if you ask questions in the chat room to preface that with the word question in all uppercase so it stands out from among the conversation. Alex asks, if you search in quotes, does it still show up in the knowledge graph snippets?
As in, do the quotes show up or the phrase?
The phrase.
I would suspect that it's not going to have much difference. Because, here's this. When I first started with SEO, I mean, like over a decade ago, we had to use quotes with everything. Because if you didn't, and we did like the pluses and the minuses and all that kind of stuff, all those Boolean search terms, because Google wasn't itself smart enough. Well, now Google is smart enough that I don't know if you've noticed, you really don't have to use quotes anymore because Google can do a really good job at figuring out, what goes together and what doesn't go together.
Gotcha. Okay, Axel has a question. Axel is, he's dialed in from Germany, and he's noticed that, or he's asking, why do no paid ads show up when you're searching, and a large number of paid ads show up when he's searching for the same thing there in Germany?
That's interesting. I have no idea. I have noticed when I have been searching for knowledge graph items, there is a limited amount of ads. Sometimes ads are showing up, but for the most part, the ads are really limited. The fact that you're searching for the exact same thing that I am and you have ads over there, I find that fascinating. I don't have an answer for it. It's just, what Google's doing. And I bet you it varies by country.
Ruana is saying that in New Mexico, she's seeing ads above Rebecca's content. Although, Ruana, New Mexico might be considered another country. I don't know. We love Ruana.
I'm trying to think of something generic that we could search for that always shows up in. I'm just trying to think what we could search for to see if everybody has some ads. What about like marketing jobs? I would be interesting to know, because this is just you never can have people from all over the world do things at the same time and give you information. Could people just search for marketing jobs, no quotes, and see if they get that nice little box that I did, or if there's something else that shows up? I think this would just be a fascinating test.
I'm seeing the box.
And nothing else, right? No ads?
I do not see ads.
How about anybody else? What are we seeing in the chat room?
Let's see. The search was marketing jobs, correct?
Yeah.
No box, got the box, no ads, I see ads.
Where do we see ads from? Let's throw us your location.
Boy, it's so the chat room is going nuts. Box with no ads in Washington State. New Zealand, 3 ads, then a box. Let's see. No box, box and no ads in Fort Worth. 4 ads in Switzerland, no boxes. So it's all over the place.
Okay, so let's try. I was going to do ACT test, but that is probably more of a US phrase. So let's look at WordPress hosting options. Now on mine, I see the featured snippets, featured snippets with position 0. Then I see the people also ask, right, which gives me additional information and links to that site. I bet you this is one where internationally there will be some ads popping up. So it's WordPress hosting options. Let's see what people see internationally.
Okay, I'm going to put a break in the chat. So everybody below the line, we're talking about WordPress hosting options.
Ads in Germany. Ads in Florida.
Isn't that interesting?
Canada, no ads. UK, loads of ads. Ads in PA and ads in California. Now I wonder if everybody's signed in or signed out. See, some of you guys are signed in. So for those of you that were signed in, I'm wondering if you are seeing ads, and those of us that are signed out are not. Ads in Maryland signed in. Oh, nope, 4 ads signed out. Well, so what have we learned with this experiment?
Absolutely nothing.
We've learned Google's drunk.
That's right. Google has been to Cozumel. Or Google is trying to wash its cat in the bathtub, perhaps.
Google is mysterious. Google is perplexing. Yes, that is correct. And okay,
that's so great.
So here's a great comment though. And Nathan said this earlier. We have a lot of developers on here because I see a lot of common names that I know from the community. When you have a client that says to you, why don't I see the exact same thing you do? And they're frustrated with you, right? You can give them these kind of examples to say that, you know what? Different people in different locations see different things. And like the example of I did the course that I created, I pulled screenshots, and then when I did it 10 days later, the results were different. Or that the rich cards that Google's showing in their instructions are completely different than the rich cards that what we're seeing in results, right? Those were 3 different examples of inconsistencies. And that you as a developer or as an SEO consultant can't always give your client an absolute, because things are constantly changing within Google, and there's so many different nuances that you can't see or you can't control. Your best job is to try to live within Google's guidelines and really do a good job at crafting a good experience for the users. And and so remember that when you have those type of interactions with clients. Or if you're an end user on this call or in this webinar and you're working yourself or you're working with an SEO client, that's a data point for you to see that, we try to do our best to really understand what's going on and be able to educate and utilize, but there's a lot of shifts and things happening.
That's great. Now, I just want to reemphasize something that Rebecca just said, and it's something that she's said over and over again throughout the webinars we've had with her, is that the single most important thing is giving a great experience to the user. Because if you're doing that, that's really Google's ultimate goal, right?
Yes. Yep.
So we have a bunch of questions still here. That was a fun little rabbit trail, though. Lots of good information from across the globe in our informal focus group. Okay, so Teresa asks, where can she go to get input on how to set up rich cards in WordPress? Is there a plugin, or what do you recommend?
So there's going to be there's plugins, and the plugins are going to probably vary by the type of data you're going to present. So I check on WordPress.org. And, when you're doing that, don't forget to make sure that you're looking at reviews and the number of downloads. Go to the support log to see what people are saying about it. Make sure that it's a really good quality plugin because you don't want it to hurt your site. And then the other thing is you can come and learn about structured data on Google's the Google subdomain for developers. Remember, they give examples of right here. They talk about why you might not be showing up. They also talk about the ways you can mark up your content, recipes, local businesses, articles, things like that. So Google itself has some really good information on it.
Yes, and also, Rebecca, you're going to be back in October talking about schema and structured data.
Okay, I am. Then we'll talk about it more then too.
Yes, okay. Next question down the line from Paul. He's also has a schema-related question, and Barbara had a similar one. What do you recommend for, is there a structured data generator out there or a plugin that you would recommend?
I think you got to first figure out what do you want to present for data, and then you look at your plugin afterwards, right? Because you're not going to find one plugin that does a great job for recipes and local businesses and music, but you will find a number of great recipes that produce schema for recipes, and you'll find plugins that do a great job for like local businesses. So figure out the type of data first, and then look for a plugin specific to that data.
Great. And let me just clarify, Rebecca will be with us in August and September. I was just jumping forward to October because that's when the schema webinar is scheduled. Okay, next question. Both Ruanna and Jordan had a similar question here. Is there a way to identify a paragraph that you'd like Google to use as a featured snippet, or is there an optimal length?
There's no way to identify it, but I would tell you just from knowing the way Google kind of reads the page, they read from left to right, top to bottom, and they expect you to set the pace for the article with kind of like a nice summary or a lead in to tell people what they're expecting. So if you're going to want to position that paragraph to show up in position 0 towards the top of your content. Don't push it down towards the bottom. Try to push it up towards the top, which is good for the reader, and it's also good for Google.
Great. Susan is asking about the data highlighter in Google Search Console. How does that relate to what we're talking about, and is it good to enable that feature?
Okay, what a great question. So the data highlighter is, we did go through that when we did the Google Search Console webinar, and I can't even remember, it was this year sometime, I don't remember what month it was. But so that is for you to manually mark up your content if you don't have like the availability to structured data, right? So like if I use the Genesis framework, that comes equipped with some structured data already. I can use plugins like Yoast Local to bring in additional data. I don't need to go to that Google Search Console and highlight my data because I already have tools to do that. Now, if I had an HTML website that didn't have any of those things, that goodness coming already from WordPress, then I would use that tool to mark up the data. And I have had clients do that. And it works perfectly fine.
Excellent. I have 3 more questions here, and it's probably going to take us to our time or maybe a couple of minutes over if you don't mind, Rebecca. One here is from Paul. Paul asks, when you're using Google Accelerated Mobile Pages, you have to agree to let Google use your data. Is that where some of these knowledge graph information is coming? And is Google gaining a monopoly on data through that?
Okay, so AMP is a little bit different than what we're talking about here. AMP is specific for those mobile devices, right? So that kind of is a whole other discussion in itself. Is Google creating a monopoly on data? Oh, heck yeah, it is. So is Facebook. Facebook knows everything about you. So does Google, because it's seeing everything you search.
Yeah, we live in that kind of world.
Yes to the monopoly, and you can add in Facebook because they have more data than any government in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting. Here's a quick question from Melanie. Does the browser you use affect your results?
It shouldn't be like the browser type Chrome versus Firefox, but whether you're signed in, whether you store history, that will definitely influence your results.
Excellent. And one last question that is, I think, will be helpful to everyone, although it's not specifically related to this topic, is from Joanne, who says that Google suspended her account and she's verified it, but it's still showing suspended. Is there a way she can reach out to them that you're aware of to deal with that? I've heard others struggling with that same issue before as well.
Are you talking about your Google My Business account?
Joanne, that's a good question. Your Google My Business account? Yes.
So I have had clients that have had issues with that, who have tried to reach out to Google through multiple channels and have not had success. However, once they contacted the AdWords people and were going to advertise, the AdWords people were magically able to fix some issues. So that is
surprise.
I cannot say that I have done that myself. However, my clients have reported that when they went to AdWords and said, I would really like to advertise with you, here's what I want to do, but you have all this data mixed up and bad, but I need that fixed first, they were able to get resolution.
Interesting.
So I haven't done it myself, but I have heard from others that was a great way to do it.
Wow. Well, folks, we've gone a long way today. Lots of great information, as usual, from Rebecca. Thanks so much, Rebecca, for being with us and for giving us this fantastic stack of information that we can sort through and learn about, and also giving us that free SEO course. Folks, I dropped that link in the chat room again just a moment ago, that free DIY course. There's actually a couple of, there's 4 of them there, actually, that you can take part in, one specifically on the Google Knowledge Graph. So make sure that you make use of this excellent resource that Rebecca is providing to you.
And one more thing, Nathan, if I could just jump up. If you guys have specific questions that you'd like covered, like that we don't cover in these webinars, you can always drop me a note through the SEO Bits website and I can cover it on a podcast, because a lot of the questions you have are more than what we can cover in a quick answer in a webinar, but not enough for like this full-blown, maybe blog post, but I can quickly cover it in a podcast episode. So feel free to hit me there as well.
Excellent. And by the way, if you didn't know Rebecca had a podcast, it's right there, seobits.fm. So subscribe to that on your favorite device and get Rebecca in your ear. Rebecca, how often do you produce those podcast episodes?
I produce them every week, and they're available via the website, iTunes, and then Google as well.
Awesome. Well, folks, thanks again for being with us. By the way, Rebecca and I both will be at WordCamp Minneapolis next weekend. So if you are up in that part of the United States, we would love to meet you. Make sure you look us up and say hi. We'd love to shake hands, have a cup of coffee, maybe have a conversation as well. So
absolutely.
That'd be a lot of fun. So, folks, thank you again for investing this last hour. Thank you, Rebecca, for giving us such great information. If you have not yet signed up for all the other free webinars from Rebecca Gill, scroll up and look at that link that I just gave you, the free iThemes webinars from Rebecca. And also, you can look at iThemes training website, training.ithemes.com, or just click the training link in the menu above the chat room. We have lots of free webinars on all kinds of topics going on all year long. We usually do 1 to 3 live webinars a week just like this that are free and ready for you to subscribe to. So thanks again, folks. Thanks again, Rebecca. I hope you all have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time here on iThemes Training.